Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Dialogue. I'm Taimur Shamil. Today is the death anniversary of Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, Pakistan's founding father, and today we give our homage to Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Quaid-e-Azam's vision of Pakistan was a Pakistan in which we all would live our lives according to the Constitution of Pakistan, according to the principles that are set by Islamic society, that is set by the Islamic principles, and also that in this country all the people, every Pakistani, irrespective of his creed or caste, would live his life. He would be free to go to his mosque, church, temple, and he would live as a Pakistani, and we are all Pakistanis, and that is it. 73 years on, today we see Pakistan. Of course, there are a lot of opportunities, there are a lot of challenges as well. We are going to talk about Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah's vision of Pakistan, his idea of Pakistan, and a couple of questions that we'll discuss today. Few of them, that are we working on those standards, on those principles? If we are, what are those standards and what are those principles? And if there are challenges, how do we cope up with those challenges? What are the areas that we need to focus on? We see that internationally the dynamics are changing. Pakistan has its own image in the region and internationally. In the neighborhood we see wars, we see aggression from one side, from the Indian side as well. We'll be discussing about all these things and Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah's idea of Pakistan. We are joined by our special guest in the studios. Our first guest is Dr. Rao Nadeem Alam. He is a renowned anthropologist and expert on Pakistan's history. Welcome to the show, Dr. Alam. Our second guest is Dr. Sajid Mahmood Awan, renowned historian and senior independent lecturer and professor of history. So, welcome to the show.
Pleasure.
Our third guest is Dr. Waqas Ali Kausar. He is an academic and expert on Pakistan's history. Welcome to the show, Dr. Kausar. Dr. Alam, starting with Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah's idea of Pakistan, as I was discussing, his vision of Pakistan. We usually, listen to this debate in the media, otherwise in the newspapers as well. There, of course, there are these standards that we have to work on, but there are challenges as well. 73 years on, how do you see Pakistan? Are we on the right way, in the right direction? How do you see it?
Well, Muhammad Ali Jinnah's Pakistan was more liberal Pakistan what we have today. However, it's not always black and white. It is always gray area that go along with this black and white thing. So we have achieved a lot of things. For example, you can see your standard of life of people, it has increased. There was no personalized or subjective constitution of the nation in the life of Quaid-e-Azam. We adopted things from British Raj. Some of them are still continuing with us. Some of them have transformed into very subjective national constitutional outlook, which is in line with the global constitutional perspectives and standards. So we have achieved a lot, but still there is a lot to do and a lot to gain. So this is like the preamble of how we can debate on things what Quaid thought and perceived. Let me recall something from his biographical account written by Fatima Jinnah, which was like she chose a lot of authors to author that biography, and G. Alana, who was then segregated from that project. However, she recalls that I wasn't able to win in argument with Muhammad Ali Jinnah, so I used to use the sentimental tone. So when I become sentimental and ask him about his health, he was always like talking about the, at that time, 10 crore Muslims. So his image of Pakistan was a homeland for Muslims, but that was not an exclusive one. That was a more participatory, more inclusive homeland, where minorities were given their due right. And what I see that how he perceived it, that Dina Jinnah became Dina Wadia. So that's how practically he accepted things in a different way, probably what most of the Pakistanis nowadays think about. But he was a certain level of like he was not only a lawyer, he was a much bigger personality than being a lawyer or being a leader. He was a role model. That's why I think that a title Quaid-e-Azam is most suitable for Muhammad Ali Jinnah rather than any contemporary political leader.
Right. And Dr. Awan, looking at Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah in his own times back then, as a leader in the Muslim world, as we can call it, or 73 years on now, looking at his personality, how do you see Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah and his vision for Pakistan?
Yeah, thank you very much, Taimur. I think it is my great pleasure to be part of this discussion on the 72nd death anniversary of Muhammad Ali Jinnah. He was father of the nation. As Dr. Rao mentioned, that when he went to England for studies, he got inspired by the British liberalism. He was inspired by Spencer, Bentham, John Stuart Mill, and such kind of personalities. Now, what he actually made new thing, that was a beautiful blend of the liberalism and Islamic values in the better interest of the Muslims of India. Earlier, everyone knows very well, he initially was ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity. He tried his level best to produce a pluralistic society and to take the society towards peaceful coexistence. He was actually demanding for the rights, protection of the rights of the Muslims. Well, one thing which was different, that Muslims, you need to know, Taimur, at that time they were marginalized people. They were basically thrown out of the corridors of power. They were basically kept out of this power centers. Now, Muhammad Ali Jinnah made his way out of that. He was lucky enough to live in Bombay Presidency, because Sindh at that time was part of Bombay Presidency. So he took his initiative from Bombay Presidency, and then he went to England, had an experience of all the modern thoughts, and decided to become a lawyer instead of searching for a job or serving the interests of other persons. He went there basically as an apprentice initially. But within 1 year, he decided that I'm not going to do any job. I am going to study law, and I will be emerging as a lawyer. The first person of which he was inspired was Dada Bhai Nauroji, who was the first ever British member of the Indian legislature. So he got all the political ideas from this British liberalism and Dada Bhai Nauroji, who himself was a liberalist. Now, he tried to make the Indians, and particularly the Hindus, convinced that, well, under this popular notion of, and under this dictum of democracy, if we want to exist, we will have to guarantee rights of all the people on egalitarian basis. And Muslims, they constitute a significant number of people, so you cannot ignore their rights. And he came up with Lucknow Pact in 1916, where he was given the title of Ambassador of Hindu-Muslim Unity. And this basically was protection of the Muslim rights for the Muslims of India. And therefrom, if we take this notion forward, up till 1920, it was not only that he was opposing Hindus, that you don't be reactionary, you don't be, even he opposed the Muslims. When they were going to agitational politics in 1919 and 1920, when Khilafat movement starts, he was the leading Muslim figure who opposed that such kind of agitational politics is not acceptable to me. And from 1920 to 1924, no annual procession of All India Muslim League could be held, because all of the Muslim Leaguers, they resigned from Muslim League and they joined Khilafat Committee and eventually Khilafat movement. He was calling them this is not a right way. But after 4 years, when they were everything was ruined, they were crushed to the ground. And then they realized, okay, Muhammad Ali Jinnah was saying something very right. They again came back, well, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, what should we do now? He said, look, there is only one way, that is democratic way. That is constitutional way. He was a staunch constitutionalist.
He was abreast with the political trends of his time.
Yeah, exactly.
He knew exactly, what the political trends were. Dr. Kausar, talking about this specific transformation of Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. He joined Congress at one point, but then he transformed, joined Muslim League. How do you see this transformation? His time when he was in the Congress, as Dr. Awan rightly said, pioneer, I would say, a champion of Hindu-Muslim unity. But there was a transformation. He became also the champion for the Muslim cause. How do you see this transformation from Congress to Muslim League?
Thank you for inviting me in this program. First, I would say to begin with that, undoubtedly, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the father of this nation, has when we see his life and we read the accounts, the biographies of the people, and then we see different historians writing about him, we see that he has all the ingredients of a great and amazing leader, an inspirational leader, I must say, a nation can, be proud on a person. From his personal life to his political life and the struggle, when we see, of course, there is a transformation. The best thing which I see in his life particularly is, of course, he was a very, in his whole life, and we see that when he stood for something, he meant it. Just as the panelists were mentioning, you just look at the overall environment where his politics was operating. Muslims, let's suppose, particularly the constituency, which was quite weaker in that context, politically deprived, disenfranchised in many ways, educationally, you said, disempowered as well. Thinking at that time, and I guess a time came when he was widely known, recognized by Britishers, Congress people as well, later as well. Look at towards his vision that he still took the responsibility and ownership of a constituency which is much deprived at that time, which was much deprived. And that is the strength, I guess, of a leader, actually, to stand in the time which is quite, volatile time, a time which is quite testing. Besides his personal life, you say, the way it transformed. I personally say one thing. When you see this transformation from Congress to, of course, your politics, there's never black and white, as he also mentioned. There is always a gray area in politics as well. There is no clear-cut things in the beginning. When we see his politics, of course, it also transformed. He went back to England once when he came back after 5 years. Quite disillusioned at that time with the situation. For civil disobedience, even his point of view was different, that people have capacity issues, resources issues. You cannot challenge these. It was his own idea which proved right to some extent later. You just say, imagine one thing, the correctness of the message and his understanding of overall politics, that when he went to Lahore in, I guess, one of the Islamia college, the students asked, Mr. Jinnah, you travel in a first class, you in BMWs and other, and unlike you, Mr. Gandhi, who also is a barrister, traveled to London, England, stayed over there, but he traveled in, third class seats and meet people and, wear an ordinary dress. But his message was, I should be known to people what I am. That is the message of a transparency as well, that there is no need, to hide things, to hide your message and do that sort of politics, one thing. Second, I must say, he tried hard to have a society that should collectively resist the occupation, colonial occupation at that time. But what we see over the period of the time, even in 1946, was Jinnah saying that, no, I disagree with this all cabinet mission plan and all that, but what Nehru did, you've seen that Patel said that it was his emotional insanity, he called this decision. The question is, Jinnah was compelled to do that, one. Second, we also need to see that Jinnah was envisioning a society which was not sort of very much, the way sometimes it is, his critics oppose that it is a very exclusive sort of a society, but no, it was a country for minority. Of course, it was a country that he dreamt of, a country which is more inclusive, as he said, which is more egalitarian in nature. The question is, it's, unfortunately passed away very after the partition, but the fundamental question is, there is no clear-cut line that is drawn by him because of the nature of the overall politics. Even you see today's politics, it's very difficult to sustain, but he has given us a concept of a nation state to us, a state which is empowering, a state which should look towards the minorities and should work on the constitutional basis.
So his idea was primarily to say no to exploitation.
Yeah, exactly.
Exploitation at the hands of Congress, Dr. Alam, because if you read history, we observed that Congress was predominantly becoming a Hindu party, which was solely focusing on the Hindu ideals of Gandhi and Nehru primarily. And they made Jinnah realize that he is a Mohammedan, he is a Muslim, and he is an outsider, while keeping other Muslims, by the way, in Congress. But Jinnah had a different way of approaching, let's say, the political ideas of his time. So his transformation again from Congress to Muslim League and actually having an understanding of the divisions, that is important. How do you see that?
There was a peripheral sentence in your comment that although there were Muslims in the Congress. So I think Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad was a very strong voice, so we cannot think them on the margins.
Right.
So they were very much on the front, and Congress was much stronger than Muslim League. So it is his moral uprightness that he transformed his ideas to join Muslim League. So that needs a very strong character, because under the British ideas or like influences, changing your political party is a hell of a thing. So, and he was upright to do it, and not only do it, but he had his own basis to do that. And then we see that usually if you transfer a political party, you are not accepted by the masses. But the huge volume of invitation, which again I'll refer to that biography of Fatima Jinnah, which where she wrote that he received a lot of letters to speak with the masses in the villages, in the towns, in the cities. So that is the appeal of his character. It wasn't only the leadership. He wasn't an actor, rather he was a character who represented moral uprightness, political transparency, and transparency in his personal life as well. So I'll agree with Dr. Costa that this is very significant thing to observe, because we never saw any political leader in subcontinent who matches Quaid Muhammad Ali Jinnah's stature in transparency.
Right, right.
So
We will take a break, and after the break we are going to continue our discussion on Quaid Muhammad Ali Jinnah's vision for Pakistan, his personality. After this break, stay with us. Welcome back. Today is the death anniversary of Quaid Muhammad Ali Jinnah, Pakistan's founding father, and we pay our homage to the great leader. Dr. Awan, talking about Quaid Muhammad Ali Jinnah, his personality, and then we'll move on to his ideas for a government, for a state, for a country. But just talking about his personality first, he wasn't pretentious. He was what he was. Very confident about himself, as we were discussing earlier. The way he dressed up, his personality, his lifestyle. How do you see that? His personality primarily.
Yeah. He was such a clear-headed person that taking his politics again, when he joined Indian National Congress in 1906, he told them clearly that what I mean to join Indian National Congress, I mean this, I would like to see this party as accommodating all the communities. Being a Mohammedan, as you said, Muslim, he is declaring quite clearly to the Congress that I see a party like this, and let me say very confidently that they got scared of him. He was such a dominating personality that if he stays in Indian National Congress, we will find no place there. He eventually will merge up to the top leadership. Better try to marginalize him. Now, realizing this situation, and look how many people were there who were member of Indian National Congress and Muslim League simultaneously.
Right.
When he joined All India Muslim League in 1912, he declared clearly, well, Muslims, I am going to join your party, but it does not mean that I will be resigning from Congress. Remaining member of both the parties, I will try to bridge them up. With such a loud announcement.
Right.
And this what he did in 1913. He formally joined that party. And remember, Taimur, that was a party which had the first condition for becoming member, that you should have that big chunk of land. And Muhammad Ali Jinnah was not a landlord. They had to mend their constitution for Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Okay, if you want to join this party, then we will have to mend the Green Book. We will have to mend our constitution.
So it was more about competency, you know.
Yes, on his competence and credibility.
Credibility.
That he will not be, he was such a rich man that he could purchase that big land.
Right.
But he said, no, I am what I am. As you
And very
said, he
clear,
was
clear about his goals, you know. This is
about-
what I want and I'll be working for this.
like this. And he joins Only Muslim League in 1913, and in 1915 he convinced both the parties, okay, next year both the parties will be convening their annual processions in the same city. As per practice, it was so that if Congress is organizing its annual procession in Bombay, Muslims will be going to Madras. If they are in Madras, Muslims will be going to Calcutta. If they are organizing in Bombay, they will be going somewhere else. And this was for the first time in history of India that both the political parties agreed first to summon their annual processions in the same city, that was Lucknow. And there he formulated a committee consisting of members of both the parties and convinced them all that, okay, we are going to sign this pact.
Right.
And for the first time, Indian National Congress accepted the right of separate electorates for the Muslims. This was a right which Muhammad Ali Jinnah earlier, he was not in favor of this. But looking at the, dominating politics of the Congress and bilkul monastic sort of politics, he said, no, this is not fair. Because this is a diversified society, and in any diversified society, you need to have federal form of government accommodating all the communities. You need to guarantee rights of other communities. You need to give them provincial autonomies. You need to give them constitutional reforms. If you are not going to do this, you will not be prolonging much. And history observed that what he said, it proved true later on. So he was such a clear person that what he said at that time is valid even now. At that time he was saying to the Congress that, okay, we need to accept federal form of government. They said, no, we are one and the same. Muslims and Hindus all are Indians. He said, no, we are not one and the same. We are Muslims and you are Hindus. Coming up with that clarity, so India will necessarily have to have a federal form of government.
Right.
They didn't accept. But later on, this proved right. Even after independence, India had to accept federal form of government. This is the claim which Muhammad Ali Jinnah was saying at that time. Had they accepted that rights claim of Muhammad Ali Jinnah, they would have been a different country. Now, as Muhammad Ali Jinnah was a constitutionalist, and he was telling them all, you need to be a constitutionalist, don't be aggressive, don't be agitational politics, and don't indulge yourself into that reactionary politics. Throughout, he adopted this tradition. And even after the establishment of Pakistan, he cleared it, he said it very clearly. Now, this is an independent country, and you are free to go to your temples, you
Right.
are free to go to your mosques, and you are free to go to your any place of worship. One. Secondly, he said that, okay, now we have established a Muslim country and
right.
state. It does not mean that we will not be accommodating and we will not be accepting rights of the non-Muslims. We are now bound under Islamic principles to give them their due rights. And now we will cease to be Hindus and Muslims in political terms. Now this is a country which is acceptable for all the people. This is a country which will be accommodating all the people.
Right.
So with this mindset, he came up with the idea that there should be a constitutional and pluralistic society granting rights to all the communities whatsoever they are there.
Dr. Kosa, this approach, he was anti-colonial, you can say, in many ways. He was anti-exploitation as well, because he sensed the exploitation that Congress was working on primarily, Gandhi at time and Nehru. Although the way they projected their image was different from their actual intentions and the way things they were practicing on the ground. Jinnah's idea of anti-exploitation and anti-colonialism, and where do we stand at the moment on those grounds, on those standards? How do you see this?
See, there are two important things in that. One, Jinnah was battling as a leader, not with one actually. The problem is it was sort of, at the a time came when it was British colonial oppression as well, but also the leaders of the Congress, the way they were countering him, that they were creating counter narrative, and the way they were trying. Of course, one time, as you said, Azad Sir was the president of the Congress as well before the Nehru steps in as a president. The question is, I mean, for him it was a very ardent task, actually, not easy, particularly when you have a very weaker constituency and people, to fight on the both fronts, remain very much committed, to have a sense of direction at that time, and that you know where are you going. I personally think when we say that, okay, he was not against the sort of in favor of the exclusive division. There is that we say the Congress didn't act the way the Jinnah proposed as well. But in my understanding, his entire journey of politics, when he was the ambassador of unity, and then the way he was, I mean, when we say he joined Muslim League, we need to understand that he joined Muslim League on one thing as well, that until and unless they understand the nationalism, Muslim nationalism, at that time there was different. Of course, Pakistan idea was not there that much, but that idea was very much there in his mind. I guess over the period of the time, his reading was very much correct, that the way this subcontinent is progressing, the way the politics is progressing, I guess Muslim, one way or the other way, this discrimination in nature, discrimination in politics, in society as well, to the larger extent, could result in a different country. That could be something meaningful, and that happened. Second, if you see that, I mean, post-partition, if we see that, I mean, it's today's BJP's India, which is very sad, the condition. I mean, what is the CAA, Citizen Amendment Act, and then it transferred into a bill, and then others. I mean, it also sort of indicated many hypotheses that we had at that time. And I guess this is a clear manifestation that this division was a lot. This division was very much obvious at that time. And he played very smartly. His politics was very accurate at that time, what I went is. I mean, you see, there was another problem and resistance within particularly in our, one of the province that we have at that time. There were people who were quite aligned to the Congress at that time. It was also one of the, another battle that he had to fight. And then we see post-40s a different phenomenon. So I guess this was his, not only his the leadership qualities, but also, of course, that sometime nature, environment, and many other forces also supports you, circumstances also supports you. But now the post-47 thing, I mean, India opted for a different trajectory. But we have to make one thing very much clear, that the speech which is also mentioned about people's freedom, justice, social justice particularly, and then he also spoke about governance system. At time he resented and he criticized and he gave strong opposition on corruption and nepotism while addressing in one of the speech, that this is something which is basically need to look. I mean, what happened post 47, that's a sad. This nation, we have to admit, until unless we don't admit things, we cannot move ahead. I don't think so. We acted the way he desired, the way he envisioned Pakistan, a more progressive society, a society where there should be a social justice, a society which people should own more, and a society which talks about the rights of the people. I mean, our constitutional history is checkered, that is sad. But I have one hope. The hope is that this nation has more than 60% young people. And there is one consensus on the personality of the father of the nation. We have to, the academician, the civil society have to come up with more clearly, more openly about the vision of this father of the nation. We have to claim that, we have to take the ownership of the society, that this Pakistan is a nation state. Anybody who believes in the territorial integrity of Pakistan, no matter what religion, caste, creed he belongs to, that is a Pakistani and equal citizen. So personally, I think we also, from the last 2-3 decades, we see there is an evolution in Pakistan, more social consciousness, more debates in society. Our society has also progressed in many ways. I mean, we have also been the victim of the world politics, no matter it's our mistakes or somebody else, but we are positioned geographically one way or the other way. We become,
that is the revenge of geography.
So that's, we can put it one way or the other way, but that's the reality. So this nation has also sustained. I mean, just one thing I want to say, that we talk a lot about society's ills as well, but see, a nation who has suffered immensely against the war on, against terrorism. The nation resisted over society, over academia, over forces, over other institutions, shown some resolve, stood up. And now Pakistan, you see today's environment, we can have debate on politics and democracy and the nature of the democracy, but this society sustained. meaning by this is a very strong fundamental basis that we are standing. And on this occasion, when we have the death anniversary, I guess we should be more showing resolve towards two things particularly. One is that the social justice that he envisioned, a society which should be inclusive of the minorities, people's rights should be upheld. Second, Pakistan's future is its constitutional democracy, where people, Pakistan is also a diverse country. When we always, sorry I'm taking much time, but just one thing, we have a lot of debate when people say your neighbor is more diverse. It's a very diverse country and all that, and Pakistan is very exclusive. No, it's not a totally exclusive society. We have the diversity of languages, cultures, tradition, value system, religion for that matter as well. And this is also a beauty. Just one thing, I mean, his vision, you can see, he visited Srinagar, Kashmir during that time, when there was debates going on and all that. When AJK, particularly this liberated territory, the people tried to accede to Pakistan at that time, he categorically mentioned one thing, that the entire state would decide the future.
The
And
people
that
will decide, right.
People will decide.
Yes.
That was his vision.
right.
That was his idea. He was in position to accept that accession as well.
Right. Dr.
So
Wan, you have a point? Yeah?
extending this argument further, let me say with very clarity that today's India, under this RSS and Modi and all that, you know, there are many vices in India that we need another Quaid-e-Azam. It's validity of his personality, it is validity of his argument, and this basically gives rightful justification to the claims of the Muslims at that time.
Right.
And I mean, the pace which he said, and remember, most of the people say that this is a new emergence in Indian politics, that was a pluralistic society, and this Modi phenomena is something new. What I say, even at that time, Muhammad Ali Jinnah was facing the same kind of situation under the leadership of Gandhi and Nehru. They were that reactionary. Had they been reasonable at that time, they would have not let Muhammad Ali Jinnah part his ways. I mean, he categorically then had to say that, okay, this is parting of the ways, and this simple sentence also proved right in the later history, that, okay, what he said, he declared it, as Stanley Wolpert also said, that there are very fewer people who may alter the course of history.
Right.
Even fewer may change map of the world, and even fewer are the ones who may create a nation and a nation state. Muhammad Ali Jinnah did all these three. And even more than that, after creating this country, he addressed to the bureaucrats, to the students, to the ladies, to the
All factions of
politicians.
society, right?
Yes, all the carers of society, his lines of direction, if we follow truly in true sense even today, not only this country, his recommendations are basically universal.
Yep.
Any country who wants to become politically progressive, open, and heading towards development, they need to observe the principles which were set and declared by Muhammad Ali Jinnah for any state. Right. And this is what even a personality like Iqbal, I mean, he was playing the politics of Punjab. Muhammad Ali Jinnah was playing the politics of Central India. They both joined hand later on, and they got convinced. I mean, Iqbal was a philosopher, and Muhammad Ali Jinnah was a practical politician. Looking apparently, they seem poles apart, but they join hands in better interest of the Muslims, that, okay, your philosophy and your idea of a separate state is more practical, and I think now we should strive on those lines, that these rights of the Muslims cannot be guaranteed in India, and Muslims will have to part their ways. This question, that what about Muslims of today, they're in India? Even this question was being asked from Muhammad Ali Jinnah at that time. He said, well, it is not the Pakistan which I was aspiring. I was aspiring more, I mean, Hyderabad was Muslim majority area, Kashmir was Muslim majority area. And I say that had the Britishers at that time followed the claims of Muhammad Ali Jinnah, there would have not been any sort of animosity here in India and Pakistan. And this basically has caused more split to the Indian society, one in Bangladesh, and again we are going to see more splits there in India. You know, this is basically rightful justification of the argument of Muhammad Ali Jinnah, that if you want to lead any society towards peaceful coexistence, you will have to guarantee rights of the all communities, irrespective of religion, irrespective of language, irrespective of culture and any ethnicity.
You rightly mentioned Allama Iqbal.
Yeah.
Dr. Alam, how do you see the relationship of Allama Iqbal and Quaid-e-Azam? Because it's the spirit, the spiritual idea of a nation, the spiritual power, I would say. And then there's Quaid-e-Azam, you know, who is armed to the teeth with dialect, as Stanley Wolpert, you know, puts it.
Yeah.
And how do you see this relationship?
Well, for me, it's like how nature determine your course, because they were far apart in the beginning, and then it started with the letters. So, how many of us or our political leadership nowadays is inspired by the letters or by the words or the text? So this is something fascinating for me, that a friendship and bringing, as Dr. Avant mentioned, that they were apart and then they were brought together and had their ideas reiterated and reformed. So this is something fascinating.
And many people think that when Quaid-e-Azam left for England, it was Allama Iqbal who persuaded him and convinced him to come back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
And to take part in the politics, because people need him in India, in subcontinent.
Well, let me give you an anecdotal remark first, because both of you mentioned Stanley Wolpert. So, recalling his book, he mentioned that because we have this upright and personality like that, we think that he was very rigid. He wasn't rigid at all.
No.
Because what Wolpert writes, that when he went to England, he anglicized his name from Muhammad Ali Jinnah Bhai to M.A. Jinnah. So this is how you accommodate yourself, and this is the same thing, that he was a man who could be convinced through logic. That's why he was convinced by Allama Muhammad Iqbal to come back. So this is,
And there's this constant transformation,
yeah,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
of ideas, of personality, of
Exactly.
becoming what he became, you know, later.
This is what we never talk about, that how Quaid-e-Azam transformed. He was
Yeah.
never a rigid man. He was always convinced through the logic. So he was always changing and improving his ideas and his life as well. So this is a very important
Exactly.
thing that we never have in the history books very apparently, although it is always over there, lying there, but
Yeah.
it is never discussed or debated in the public.
Yeah.
So this is an important thing, an important aspect of Quaid's life. And secondly, coming back to the relationship of this dyad of Quaid-e-Azam and Allama Iqbal. So there was a man of constitution, and then there was a man of fantasy. So this is a lethal combination. We lack this dyadic relationship in contemporary Pakistan, that we do not give space to the fantasy men or the men of letters. So this is something which we must learn from this relationship. Secondly, again, a very anecdotal remark, that I came across two words in this discussion. One was his thinking of an egalitarian society. His thinking was not of an egalitarian society, but of a just society.
Yeah.
This is
Fine.
very important to know.
Fine,
And
fine.
then here I think that both the personalities synchronize with each other, because Allama Iqbal had the similar thought. Second thing is he always had a bifurcation of macrocosm and microcosm. In the microcosm, if we revisit his speeches, we see he has clear instructions for do's and don'ts. So for students, you do the learning. You don't have to pick up the weapons. And for Army and Air Force officers in his speeches, you have to defend the country. You don't have to be the politics or be in that politics. So this is how he has clear boundaries and frameworks for microcosmic roles. And then on the larger cosmic scene, as you already mentioned, that he was a very staunch advocate of maintaining diversity within a with a unity of nation.
Right.
So this is very important, which we need to learn from
Unity in diversity,
Yeah,
primarily.
exactly,
So that's
exactly.
the idea.
that was the primary message he always advocated.
Right.
Yeah,
Dr.
yeah.
Kaushal, how do you see this unity in diversity concept, Quaid-e-Azam's idea of Pakistan. We were discussing earlier, we are a Muslim country, Muslim nation, but the minorities, non-Muslims have their rights. Where do we stand at the moment, and how can we work on those ideals?
See, I mean, we see the after partition, I mean, there were many non-Muslim ministers and people who belong to a community which does not belong to religion like Islam. It was very much obvious that the society which he envisaged was something which is, of course, inclusive of religion, available religion people, those who were there. But fundamentally, we need to see one thing. Of course, there was a lot of hostilities at that time. The migration happened. A lot of people got, in crossing killed, and it was a huge sacrifice. There was a sentimental and emotional thing as well. Because as an academician, we can always evaluate things based on the facts, figures, and then maybe sometime we can take out the emotional or subjectivity outside. But politics is always played in a real world. We see, I mean, just imagine the way the entire things happened, the way people migrated across. It was not an easy, and they particularly when the Muslims came, the Hindus went from here. The question is, we see how the overall politics play at that time. And even in that context and in that environment, if we have a sort of parliament which we have a law minister, maybe Hindu and some other people, this was very much a clear message for the entire nation as well. Sadly, we need to admit few things that over history, the political journey was not that much correct after that. We had issues, we grappled with the constitutional issues. We couldn't, travel the democratic dispensation the way it should have been. But over the period of time, we came to the constitution and that consensus in 1973. In between is a huge time, more than 2 decades. So that was something which I guess was something imminent at that time.
Right. We are short of time, and I'll ask Dr. Awan this question. Dr. Awan, since 47, there have been many challenges, but there are a lot of things that are positive. The way we have faced so many challenges, we have fought wars, this war on terrorism, the way we have been fighting poverty. But over the years, if you see that now we have more universities, comparatively, compared to like 20 years back, 30 years back. More hospitals, better health facilities, although there's a lot of room for improvement, but gradually, albeit slow I would say, but we are heading in the right direction. Overall, things have been improving.
Well, let me start with this priori, that wherever we deviated from the sayings and the principles of Quaid, we had to face problems. And where we were following those lines, we were making miracles. One thing. Secondly, as you were saying, the issue of how he decolonized. And secondly, you were asking from Dr. Kausar that how he was dealing with non-Muslims. This is such a bleak difference that when he was dealing with the masters, the Christians, the rulers, the British, he was very strict. When he was dealing with the non-Muslim minority here in Pakistan, he was very soft. Let me give you one example. Mountbatten said 2 things. That, well, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, you are going to be head of the state. I hope you will be following the principles of good rulers like Akbar the Great. He was also a Muslim ruler. And Muhammad Ali Jinnah spontaneously responded, well, Mountbatten, this can be a model, but we have a much better model, that is Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and that is Muhammad, peace be upon him. He gave us the principles of peaceful coexistence and egalitarianism and equal rights for the non-Muslims. Secondly, Mountbatten claimed that as India is going to accept me as first Governor General, better you also accept. He said, well, Mountbatten, we are going to establish first ideological state. How can I accept the first head of state of an ideological Muslim state, a non-Muslim? So you can't be...
Right. So here too he was clear.
He was not an opportunist. As I said earlier, that even he opposed Muslims where he felt them wrong.
Right.
He opposed Mountbatten. I'm not going to accept this.
Again, being just was
Yeah,
was his
yeah,
personality.
his personality.
No, like, let me
Right,
add
gentlemen,
that there was General Gracie leading the army.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
he
yeah.
wasn't against a certain
The-
faith
yeah,
of people
yeah.
in a democratic state.
Yeah.
He saw the roles as roles. But
Yeah.
although the head was representative,
Right.
so,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it was an ideological state, so the head of the state could not be
Right.
from another faith.
Yeah,
Gentlemen,
yeah.
thank you for joining us. Pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you.
Dr. Alam, thank you for joining us. Dr. Aban, thank you for your
Pleasure.
time. Dr.
Pleasure.
Kausar, pleasure having you on the show. Thank you.
Honored.
That's all from today's dialogue. See you next time. Khuda Hafiz.